Hello. Um, no word from Brandy still, so try to talk about something else today. I was thinking about something long overdue, and it always helps for me when I go back to the beginning. So today I was thinking about talking about my father and a little bit about his father and what I can remember. And the remembering part is not going very well. Sometimes when someone asks me questions, that helps a lot. Kind of like tickling yourself, I guess. It's different. My father's name was Harold Wayne Gibson. I'm sure he took some honor that I happened to be born on his birthday and that he happened to give me his middle name and last name, I guess. Um, I did not. It was a sort of mental torture all of my life. If I ever had a birthday that I was happy about, I don't remember it. In fact, I stopped celebrating them. I don't know. I couldn't tell you. I don't remember my last birthday that I had any interest in. I remember once I was very little. I dug a mud pit to play a giant mud tug of war with friends and a big party, and that's the last one that I remember. It's quite frankly all I remember about it. There were a lot of people, I think, but we'll go further back than that. All the way back from before I was born. My grandfather, my father's father, Red, Papa Red is what we called him. Trying to remember his name. I don't do well with names. Dates, not as bad as names, but still pretty bad. It'll come to me maybe. As far as I knew them, um, he lived in a two-story house in Houston. And what was odd about my grandpa's house, um, he owned two lots side by side, and they were fenced off from each other. And this part was always so odd. One had his house, the other was empty. And as long as I can remember it, it was empty. I don't even, I think he even kept it clear of trees on the empty lot side. Maybe there was a stump that I'm remembering, I'm not sure. I remember he would mow it, I would help him mow it. Now on his house side lot, he had giant pine trees. Um, there was a berry bush, blackberry bush, that grew every year on the backside fence. And one of my favorite treats and fond memories was always to go over there when they were in season to pick them, to take them in his house, and to crush them with milk and sugar. And it was delicious. And I loved doing that. Now, he was a crotchety old man at his best. I don't know anyone who would ever describe him as lovable or likable. I am told the way he raised his kids. Um, he was an abusive asshole. That's not their quote, but I'm sure they would not dispute it. Um, he was a merchant marine way back when, and that's sort of the tough type of man. Um, Back then, it was a little bit more quote acceptable, though I don't like that word. There's probably a better word. It was more common for men to be aggressive to their wives, to their children. Spanking certainly was still in style. Um, but I don't want to say it's acceptable because my grandma divorced him. And my understanding is, now she never really talked about this, but my understanding it was because of Papa Red's actions and his abusive behavior, which was learned or passed down to his children, my dad, my dad's brother, my uncle. Now, Papa Red, from my memories, was not abusive. Now, he's an asshole. Um, you could see he had anger problems, but for whatever reason, they were tempered either through age or uh, maybe he had learned some type of lesson. I'm not sure, but I never experienced that from him. It was believable, but not from my own firsthand experience. He lived alone. He was diabetic. I'll talk more about my grandma on that side, who was always known as Nana. Now, Nana would come and visit him even after they divorced, would make sure he was okay, check his blood sugar, and even saved his life a couple times from my understanding or my memory of it. So I never knew them when they were married. This divorce happened before my time, but I couldn't tell you when. I know he was always alone. There was one time I remember, and I was a very small child. Um, we went to eat. Maybe he was courting, or I'm seeing a neighbor lady. Um, but other than that, never saw him show any interest in dating. He just sort of wanted to live his life. Um, his property was not what you expect from a property in the middle of Houston. Um, it was almost something to a kid, like a forest, a mini forest just plopped right there. And I, as a kid, well, remember, this is way back then. We had TVs. Now, I remember Nana had a black and white TV, but I believe it was mostly color. Um, but a lot of playtime for my childhood was always going outside. So I was never, I'm sure at some point I was like, "Oh, I don't want to go over there." But um, there was always something to do as a kid. Now, he was something of a hoarder, not a terrible one. I've seen much worse, but definitely a hoarder. There was always old vehicles broken down. I suppose my father inherited this as well, but in particular, I remember an old ice cream truck. Now, this ice cream truck worked at one point in my life, or I'm misremembering something. Um, but it, I can't say. I know I talked with him a lot when I was a young boy, but my impression now is that he had some attachment to children in some way. My hypothesis later on is that he wanted to make up for the way he treated his own children because you had this ice cream truck, obviously for kids. And I remember him driving a school bus at some point. And what stood out to me, besides him being a angry old man, you probably don't want to trust your children with. Um, I remember us going to a Shipley's donut place. Now, if you've ever had Shipley's, you Krispy Kremers out there, um, you're living in a delusional life of your own making. A warm Shipley's glazed donut, fresh from the oven. Mm, my mouth waters right now just thinking about it. Mm, so good, so good. I remember being up early, riding the bus with them, stopping at this donut place. Um, so, his property was large. It's not your average house um, in Houston. And remember, two lots, but one was completely empty. Um, and his house itself, always old, so I don't know when it was built, but it was old even when I was a child. Two stories, so that's always fun as a kid. Um, and it had these, you know, you ever been in houses that smell old? Rooms aren't used for years or decades. You go in the room and, it has that smell. That's the way his room smelled. Um, and he always had tools and junk piled around, and uh, I guess like a tool room or I'm not sure. You know, um, I would learn later in life what quarters are like, where there's only one path through. But still, when you're a kid, lots of stuff to explore and play with. And he would teach me how to use his riding lawnmower and to ride around. Um, so that was cool. I remember one time there was a squirrel that got injured. I remember big, tall pine trees. Um, and just giant. At least the way I remember him. And so the squirrel was injured. So he built a cage around between two pine trees. So imagine you have two pine trees somewhat close together. You build a cage around them so the squirrel could, run around the two different trees and still be in the cage until it healed or whatever. And so that was neat. Um, he had woodpeckers. He had this, I don't know, old power line or something that wasn't used. So a pole up there. They had woodpeckers that lived in it, and throughout my life, they just hollowed that thing out, and you would always be able to hear them pecking away. We would sit outside, me and him, and we would talk away. I don't remember much about anything. Um, Hard to know what he really thought about things. I'm sure it was a life of regret. That much I feel is true. I I don't know. I don't remember him being mean to me. I knew he was. Everybody knew. He had old turkey neck. We used to make fun of him. So I don't know. If my dad ever talked about as a kid, I don't remember. I think Uncle Rodney hasn't. He wouldn't. I know it gave him problems, um, anger issues, and growing up, uh, that would possess me as well. And we're going to come to talk about that a lot coming up. But it's hard for me to pass a judgment on Papa Red if he ever was able to overcome that, because I don't remember. But even at a young age, it put in my mind that, well, if he was that way and my father was that way, will I be that way? Am I that way? Is it because of them? Nature versus nurture from the very beginning. I don't know. Still to this day, my answer has changed through these years. What percent matters? I'm trying to think of anything else with him. I remember both my grandparents died within a short amount of time. I don't remember what year. And several years later, both my grandmas. All wildly different people. But of my grandparents, Papa Red would be the one I was most worried about. Most worried about having a negative impact of my life. And I would have to say, of the people growing up, it turns out my grandparents made the most positive impact on me. Now, sometimes it's through doing the wrong thing and me being old enough to understand what they were doing was wrong. And sometimes it was because they tried to do the right thing but couldn't. So he has some credit, um, but I suppose there would have to be other people who are more qualified to answer if he understood the things he did wrong in life and tried to make it better. From my point of view, it seems that way, but not sure. Anyway, I guess for now, we'll stop there with Papa Red and carry on to the other ones a little bit later. Have a good night.